Happy New Year. We made it to 2025. I hope you had a very happy holiday season. And here's to hoping and wishing for a wonderful 2025. And to start it off, we have the first episode of the Wine-Centric Show for 2025, which is second part of the Andre Mack series here. We left Andre in the last episode going to the back door of Cafe Annie in Houston, Texas to meet Master Sommelier Paul Roberts for the first time. And within a few minutes of getting to know Paul, Paul reveals to Andre that he is going to work for Thomas Keller as Thomas Keller's head wine director of all properties the very next week. We'll jump in there, enjoy, drink deliciously. How did you even get that job?
Oh, yeah. So here we go. Cafe Annie. I showed up at the back door.
Yeah.
Paul Roberts is the only master sommelier in the state of Texas. This is a Thursday. I show up on a Thursday. I'd been calling him all during the week, the previous week, and phone tag, and then he never called me back. And then there was a guy, Leon Sakota, I think at the time worked for Block Distributing. And he's like, hey, I know Paul. He goes, I just talked to Paul. I told him about you. Yeah, he said, just show up at the back door tomorrow. So this is Wednesday night. I'm at work. Leon calls me, says, show up at the back door. I show up at the back door. So next day, show up at the back door. So now I'm at the back door. I come in and Paul's on the phone. I had never met Paul before. So he's like just whipping back and forth and he's like on his cell phone. And he's like, hey man, come on in, blah, blah, blah. He's like, so we went upstairs and they had like this boardroom, which I guess was maybe a private dining room, but it had a big long ass table. And when I went up there were like all of these wine lists wrapped in saran wrap, like the whole table. It was like a 12-foot table. And so he's like, hey, he goes, so he brings me a wine. He goes, you can hang out here. He brings me a wine list and he says, this is what we're going to be working with tonight, which was the Cafe Annie wine list. So he goes, make yourself familiar. So I'm flipping through it, blah, 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 blah. Then he comes back in and he's like, oh man, sorry about this. He goes, I'm judging a wine list competition. So think about this. This is before like the real internet, right? So he has all the physical ones there. And he says, so he's off the phone. He says, sorry about that. And he says, hey, let's grab a coffee. And then you tell me about yourself. But before so we're walking down the stairs of Cafe Annie to go into the dining room part. And he says, oh yeah. He goes, on Monday, I accepted the job to be the beverage director for all of Thomas Keller's properties. Are you kidding me, bro? So this is Thursday. And this is why he didn't call me back. Right? He was swamped. Like all this stuff was happening. I had no idea, right? Because there's no social or, there's no news or anything like that about it. And so I was like, oh, wow, okay. So then we walk down and we just start talking, drinking coffee. Who shows up? Josh Reynolds shows up. And he's the national sales manager for Rosenthal at the time.
Okay.
And
Josh Reynolds, who writes for
who passed away. Yeah, who recently passed away. God rest his soul. So he's there. And now we start drinking margaritas. And so Paul, they used to put in burgundy glasses, they put ice and we would drink margaritas with salt on the rocks. And like, we're having a conversation. And I'm talking about, I want a stage and maybe in New York and like all of this stuff. So we're just talking. And then Paul's like, yo, it's time. I'm like, huh? He goes, I was like, okay, we got to go. He's like, let's get to the dining room. So I'm like getting up to go to the dining room. He's like, no, take your margarita with you. So we go in the back station, like working with that dude, man, I felt like I was on another planet.
Yeah.
He was amazing. And, maybe I haven't said it enough to anybody, that dude made you feel that nobody could touch you. The way that he worked, how brilliant he was, how he talked about wine, talked about food and wine pairing, just his whole philosophy, just you were hooked. And you were like, what? And like the stuff that he was doing, you're like, can you do that? I remember I said, well, how can you open the bottle of wine before presenting it to the guests? And he says, well, they asked me to choose the wine for them. So I got to taste it before I bring it out to them to make sure it tastes the way that I thought it tasted. You know what I mean? It was just, we didn't present corks. I mean, it's just like, and so I'm on the floor with him, just me and him. I don't think they ever had sommeliers that hung out or whatever, but like I'm on the floor with him. And I learned the table numbers and the time that I was sitting in the boardroom, right? So I was like, oh yeah, he would just look at me. I was like, I got table 13. He's like, what? Table 13? I said, yeah, that's right there, 13. It's like, I got that. Like, and then it was just eye contact in the diner. And I would be like,
first night?
I got that. Yeah, it was only one night. was only one night. Yeah. So I'm there. He's asking me questions. Like, he's like, I'm sure same way. He's like, who the fuck is this kid? Who's this guy? So, and then he's like, so he's asking me about my list, and he was like, he's like, I said, yeah, oh, yeah, Graham. I said, I got Conterno. And he goes, which one? I said, Aldo. Like, it was all of these things. And he's like, I was like, yeah, I got Grand Cru 97 on the list. He's like, what? And you know what I mean? So we just started clicking. And so now it's the end of the night. And he's funny. He's like, you got this competition tomorrow? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you need brain food. So he's like, orders me a fish. And he's like, who'd you come with? He told me to bring my girlfriend over. And then he's like, I got to hire 6 sommeliers over the next year. Would you like to come to the French Laundry? And
From
I
night
said,
one,
fuck.
he offered you the job.
Yeah. I said, fuck yeah. Then he said, he goes, what does your girlfriend do? And the girl I was dating at the time, I was like, oh, she works in the bakery at the Central Market. He goes, Thomas just opened a bakery. So we came over, I ate, and then I left, and I realized I had left my bag there. So the next day was some sommelier competition. That's why I was in town. I called him, and when the phone rang, he goes, you won, right? I know you won. Come on over. Let's celebrate. And I was like, no, I don't know yet if I won because the results aren't in, but did I leave my bag there? He goes, oh, yeah, your bag's here. Because after you win, come on by. We'll celebrate. I won. I came over. He pulls the crew cup off of the shelf behind the back bar because actually he had to send it to Richard Betts, right? Because Richard Betts had crew cupped it and he needed to send it off, but he breaks it off the table.
Pausing for a second because the Krug Cup is an insanely big deal. The Krug Cup is awarded to the sommelier who passes all 3 phases of the Master Somm exam: blind tasting, theory, and service on their first try.
Takes it off the back bar, puts it on the bar in front of me, puts it up with a 6-pack of Sierra Nevada. He's like, drink this. And so, you know what I mean? And this is what I say to people. It's like, it's all what you put into it. Like, if I would have never made that phone call, I would have never met this person. If I never would have showed up at the back door and not go in, literally hours later, my life had changed.
That's
there was,
unbelievable.
those were those opportunities. He said, hey, I got to hire these people. And so, that's how I made it to the French Laundry.
Timing, intuition, gumption, all those things. I mean, that's unbelievable. A couple things to tease out in there. Mentioned Aldo Conterno, one of the foremost producers of Barolo. If you guys can get your hands on any wines from them, do it. They will. Mm-hmm. It is one of the benchmark Barolo producers, which of course comes from the Piedmont region in Italy, and always Nebbiolo. Okay, so you get to the French Laundry.
Yeah,
you obviously work your ass off. You're living in basically like a bungalow with
it was wild.
With a weird ass shower. How long did it take you to get invited to New York? And you open per se?
Open per se. I asked to go to New York.
Okay, so I was hired Thomas. You knew Thomas was opening up.
Yeah, no, totally. So it was a thing already, right? So like when Paul said he had to hire 6 sommeliers, and we were in Houston, Texas, like that, I was like, oh yeah, I did hear something about Thomas was opening a restaurant in New York, and so it was quite a bit of ways. And so I didn't think anything of it. You know what I mean? My thing was like, I had never been to New York ever, right? So it was like, they're assholes. I don't want to go there.
You were born in Trenton, New Jersey.
Correct, but see, that's so. But ready? We weren't allowed to go to when we said the city. When you're from Trenton, you say the city. That means Philly,
okay.
Right? We weren't allowed to go to New York City, right? So it was a little different. You know how like regional it is, and even though it's so compact, right? So I had never been before, and the interest. So I had never been, and as the hype, I just had no desire. But as it started to get closer and closer, you just say to yourself, you're like, Andre, I don't think you can sit this one out, brother. You know what I mean? Like you can't sit on the sidelines. And it was just like, each day, like in huddle up in pre-shift, Thomas would be there, just talking about different things. He's like, hey, as we get closer, guests are going to start to ask you about the new restaurant. At first it didn't have a name, but then when it had a name, then like what that name meant. And then, then he would just go off into this thing. He says, well, people say, how is it different? And, it's called per se, and in it of itself. So it's not going to be the French Laundry, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes on to say, well, he goes, if Barry Bonds got traded from the San Francisco Giants to the New York Yankees, he wouldn't change his swing. right? It'd be wearing a different uniform. It'd be different. And you know what I mean? And like, so that was it. You know what I mean? So like, as he's saying all these things, I'm just like, and you know, and then Paul was getting Time Out magazine. So Time Out magazine in New York used to, I think that's all over, but like the Time Out in New York, that it used
Big
to mean
deal.
something. It was popping. Like back in the day, like that's where you went. Not so much now, but, and so he was getting them. So I think he was making trips to New York. So he had them and you know, and I'm looking at it. So I decided on my birthday, we were drinking.
By the way, Christmas Day is your birthday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also
so on
the
Christmas,
birthday of Hanukkah this year.
yeah,
So
that's right.
happy birthday, happy Hanukkah, Merry
Happy
Christmas,
Hanukkah.
happy Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate.
Yeah, it was awesome. We, so I went to Paul's house in Napa for Christmas, my birthday, and we're drinking like 1976 Montrachet from, I think, Etienne Salze. I can't remember. I think that's the producer. And I'm just talking to him, and there was a Time Out magazine, and I'm flipping through it, and I just said, hey, like right in that moment, I was like, I think I want to move to New York. Can you make that happen for me?
And that had been, how long had you been working at French Laundry at that point?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, forget, maybe 9 months, 10 months, a year, something like that.
Okay. Well, in
And
the
he was
restaurant
like,
business, 10 months is a year, right? Like,
yeah, totally. So he says to me, he goes, yeah, I think we can make that happen. And he says, okay, now you need to stay, but you have to stay to the end of the year to help us shut down the restaurant. And then you could go. And then basically, if I did that, I got 2 months rent free. So Thomas rented like 5 floors of apartments on this building called Wilshire Plaza on 57th and 7th. So right around the corner from where the restaurant was going to be.
yeah, Columbus
And
Circle.
So I stayed there. Me and my girlfriend stayed. We moved. And I think I showed up to New York. I was, you know, because right off of Times Square, it started snowing. You know,
So-
you know what I mean? I went to Cat's Deli. And I went to Carnegie Deli, not Katz. I went to Carnegie, and that was, you know, and that was it. It started snowing. I called my mother, and I was in New York. It was an epic first night. I won't go into it, but it was just like that. And you know, I was there.
Go into it a little bit. Like, where'd you eat dinner?
No. So yeah, I mean, no. So it was just weird, right? Because I got there, I forgot, you know, and it's not like cell phone. There's no texting at the moment. Like no text doesn't really exist. And for a lot of people didn't understand it. So we went to Carnegie Deli, right in the middle, drank a little bit, then came back. And then I ended up falling asleep. And then Paul calls me. He's like 2 floors down. He's like, we got to go to dinner. And I'm like, oh my God, dude, I can't go to dinner. You know, but you have to go to dinner. So I get up, I go to dinner. I'm full. I mean, I think I had the sandwich called the Woody Allen. I forgot what was on it, but anyway, it's huge. So I power through dinner and I'm like, fuck. But we go to, it's called Rue 57, which is right around the corner. It wasn't great, but I think we were meeting some buyers there or something and they needed to spend some money they count. So we went from there. Then we went to an Irish pub that was like just right across the street and we hung out and drank beers there. And then they're like, oh, we're going to Jimmy's. And I'm like, what? They go, yeah, it's like a boxing bar called Jimmy's. It's like right off of Times Square. So we go down there. We're in the back room. I think allegedly they filmed Raging Bull, a part of Raging Bull in the back or some shit like that. But it was like this crazy boxing bar. And then it was all of these wine people in the back room. Matter of fact, there was somebody who used to be my sales rep in San Antonio that was there. That was the first night I had with Del Maguey Mezcal. Like it was the first time, you know, so it was like so much shit happening. Just the first day. It was just like, and
that is in the New York Minute.
Yeah. And that was it. You know, I think that those were the things. It was just like recognizing the opportunity, like going along for the ride. Like it's like, okay, like all I cared about New York was like, you know, at the time, you know, I was studying with the court. It was like, I got my books and I got a ticket to the big dance, which is per se opening. And I'm here just to learn anything and everything that I can. And that's it. You know what I mean? That's what I talk about. Is like getting the most out of your job. Yeah, dude, I used to spend, I think like I used to be at the restaurant till 4 a.m, like cleaning out old computer files, fixing Square. This is at the French Laundry. You know what I mean? So I spent so much time there, but like, you know, people say, well, I don't get paid enough to do that. But like, I'm learning on there, you know, for free, right? You know what I mean? It's like, I really want to know how Square works, how the system's working, which made it really easy when I came to New York. Originally, when I came, they were looking for a head sommelier. I was just one of the floor sommeliers. And then I became the head sommelier. But I was one of the few if not the only part of management that actually worked at the French Laundry.
Right.
And so that was it, like putting yourself in a position to be able to, like my mama says, like, it's like, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's what I tell people. It's like, greatness is not this elusive thing that only the greatest among us ever taste. Right. You know what I mean? Like, greatness, it lies in everybody. It's whether or not you rise to the occasion. Some people don't even try. Right.
Yeah. Some people would have like their Carnegie Deli Woody Allen sandwich and just went to bed.
Right. Correct. But like, we're in New York. But I mean, I wouldn't even been in New York if it's just like recognizing the moment. You're like, well, holy shit. Like, the whole restaurant industry is talking about the restaurant that I'm currently working at, the new restaurant that's going to be in New York. I was like, I need to be in New York. I'm going to go to New York. And that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can relate on a little while, because being a buyer and a sommelier and a wine director in a prominent position in New York City just opens the doors to so much. And like, you were in, no offense to San Antonio, I hear it's a really cool city, but like, it's nowhere on the world wine map. 3 years later, you're at the literal top of the food chain.
Right.
I mean, I remember, that's how I know you, is working as a buyer.
Yep.
You came when you were just starting Maison Noir. It was Mouton Noir at the time.
Totally.
To BLT in the restaurant. Like, I remember people would give me an Audi A8 to drive around for the week just because they wanted to see somebody in high profile in that car. It was like those types of things. So it's like, it's opens so many doors.
It does. But this is the other part when I look at is, so how did some kid from San Antonio, Texas come to New York and take the top spot? Right. That was always my thing, is because sometimes when you have it all, it's too much. Right. Meaning like, in New York, you have access to everything. So you're like this. Prime example. I'm at Per Se, I'm back in the office. I'm doing some spreadsheets. Somebody comes back, one of the sommelier floor somebody comes back and they're like, yo, we got 45 Mouton out of Magnum open if you want to come out and try it. Nah, I'm good. I had it 3 times last week. See what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? When you, and that was it, like that was kind of like everybody was like, we don't know this guy. Like, he's not from the scene here. But it was one of those things. It's like, when you're starving for it and hungry and then feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, you do those things. I worked really hard, and I remember like showing up to New York and everybody's like, well, who's this guy, blah blah blah. But it was like, no, some of you guys were resting on your laurels, and I came up in here and did my thing. But also, like, I was I did work at the French Laundry, so it was just like an interesting thing. And you're right, moving here, I had a built-in friends. Like, I wouldn't really call them friends, acquaintances, right? That would take you out, and not just because they paid, but that would show you the city. That, you know what I mean? Like, that wanted you to see the city, and like you got like this crash course on living in this city, which was amazing, invaluable. I feel some
working
people
in restaurants, especially like Per Se, gives you a social network immediately.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Why? By the way, I worked at Per Se for about 2 weeks, just so you know. I'm an alumni.
When was that?
After you, this would have been probably right after you. This would have been, Jimmy Hayes, 07.
Jimmy Hayes,
07. So, but
I left at the end of the year. Yep.
For anybody who ever worked in restaurants, this is like restaurant on steroids, man. I mean,
correct. Bro.
Yes, I know people know stuff, but like, you got to know everything. You got to know what the farmer that grew the freaking, the sage eats for breakfast, that type of stuff.
No, it is. And that's what, when I left, I told people, I was like, if you think that you're a sommelier, blah, 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 you need to come work here. And you'll understand. And it wasn't that we were arrogant about anything. We just really knew what it took. Yeah. And so when you went to other places, you were kind of like, okay, this is kind of not great.
Why did you leave?
Because you had. I left Per Se because I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like, I think for me, I wanted to get. There was lots of different things. Like, at some point, you look at the pomp and circumstance. You see 40. I'm exaggerating, right? 40 chefs, back in the kitchen, all bent over plates, blah, 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 blah. And what I realized is that there was a shift, there was a change. When I first got there, I was going to all the fancy restaurants, but then, David Chang opened up Momofuku. And to me, there was something happening there where it was like, no, this is a guy that took all the techniques and worked at all the restaurants that, that we all kind of revered. And now he was applying those techniques to common street food. The vibes were right. Like, I didn't need my waiter to wear a Gucci suit or Armani tie. I didn't need to eat off a $200 Cristoforo fork, right? Like, the thing was, but the food was just as good, if not better. Mm-hmm. And they played their favorite music. They're playing, Led Zeppelin, right? And they're wearing Leonard Skinner t-shirts and shell tops Adidas. Like, that was the vibe. It was changing. And from what I understood was, most of the chefs that worked in our kitchen, they all aspired to be restaurant owners someday. But only a handful of them aspired to open a restaurant like the one that we worked in. What do they say? The roosters always come home to roost, or whatever that saying is. Yeah. And a lot of those people eventually went back to where they were from, or where they were from, to lay roots, and they were going to open their own restaurants. But they were going to be more like Momofuku and less like Per Se.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make wine for those restaurants. And for me, that was it. It's like, hey, I wanted to continue to learn about wine, right? Outside of the four walls of the restaurant. I wanted to scratch a couple other itches I had. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Bro, I didn't own anything. You know what I mean? Like, I just wanted to own something, own nothing. Yeah. You sold everything to come to the city for the opportunity, then to come to the city. Didn't own anything. And, sommeliers, I say this all the time, sommeliers are more akin to a curator at an art museum, right? We just collect people's stories. It's a list of inventory, not a lot of creativity in that. And so I wanted to have a little bit more creativity in my life. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. That was it. That was it. So then what happened
was the straw that broke the camel's back, the switch that you're like, all right, I'm giving my notice or I'm out.
Well, I mean, the straw that broke the camel's back was really our water. So we had specialty water that we ordered, and we would always have to have a reserve.
Wasn't it Saratoga?
No, you're thinking because of the blue bottle. We had what was it called? We had there were two. It was Tynet. So we had two English waters. We had Tynet, which was a sparkling and a blue, and then we had like Hilden, which was clear bottle that was white. And then we added a third water, which was called Vatviller, and it was from Alsace. It's one of Paul Roberts' favorite waters. It was interesting. It was funny. I remember somebody was like, "Oh, this is H3O." Like, it was really heavy water, and it came in like a little squat bottle. So, but like, these were waters that weren't used a lot in New York, and so we had to pre-order them, and they would be there. Then it ran out. So I get the wine program where I felt like I can go away for like a Saturday, and the water messes up. We don't have the reserves. And so this has happened before. So we end up going down to Whole Foods and get, Pellegrino. So we had some water, and the director of operations lost it and was like, blah, 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 blah. Like, we're not using this. I said, but we used it in the past. Like, so we're just not going to have any bottled water. It was just weird. And that was kind of it. I was like, I'm out. Like, this is stupid. But, I think I became more comfortable. Like, I have to say, like, I probably wouldn't have left that job. I met my wife. My wife worked there, and we had kind of a secret romance because, like, there's a no fraternization policy. But we met there, and that was kind of that was it. So she left to write a book called Service Included. So it was I wouldn't say a tell-all. It was a tell-some. It was really a love letter to the restaurant industry, to that restaurant, and to me. And I think that, when they found out, they considered her press, and they were like, no one's not allowed to talk to her without talking to our PR company. And I just kept thinking, I'm in the manager's meeting. I'm like, this is going to make really interesting pillow talk, right? But I think that really kind of gave me the, the impetus to say, okay, like, I can do this. She had just sold the book. I didn't realize that you could sell a book without writing it. So she, did the book proposal, and I was like, wow, like, it was just a lot of excitement. And I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to have an impact on this industry. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I've seen other sommeliers, create wine brands and stuff like that. Like, maybe that's what I'll do. And so I left. And that, that was it. It was pretty wild.
Well, man, I mean, I feel like we've done the
Did I lose
tell-all
you there,
Andre
brother?
Mack, and
No, you're there.
we haven't even gotten to the winery or anything. So we might have to bring you back for a part
Yeah,
two, because I know.
Get to it. I'm here.
All right, let's do it, man.
I'm here.
Okay, cool. I got time. Let's do it.
Yeah. All right.
So what was the first move? Because you said you were bartending, but obviously, like we talked about, when you're a wine buyer in New York City at the top of the food chain, you have entree into a lot. And
No, absolutely.
So how'd you start? And by the way, we didn't even talk about this, but like the fact, and this is another thing that, like, if you look at like the sliding doors of your life, and you got called, per se, you got nicknamed the Black Sheep, and and you leaned into that, man, and you were like,
Correct.
I'm not going to be offended. I'm going to take that because that actually sounds cool. And you called the wine company Mouton Noir, like Black Sheep in French.
So that was my screensaver. So yeah, we were, so like, you do pre-shift, and, Thomas didn't believe in a set wine pairing, and I kind of get it, right? Like, it was, so each person that wanted to do a wine pairing, it was more about a conversation, and we had a conversation with the guests, and based on their likes and dislikes, we would create, a wine pairing that was unique to them. And so at the pre-shift, we would just kind of recommend wines. So we'd be like, okay, blah, 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 blah. We would do this. And so we would tell stories, and we were telling the story about Robert Bialy's Zinfandel was called Black Chicken. And the story behind it was, like, during Prohibition, they would come, they were still making booze like on the side. So they, it's like, hey, I'm gonna get some eggs, and, I'll take a black chicken. And that was the code word for them to sell them booze. And so they were all laughing and blah, blah, blah. So, how that, and how restaurants, so like the pre-shift's over, and then you'd like, before the start service, everybody's kind of grouped up. And so they were kind of joking around. They're like, oh, we're going to call you Black Chicken. I was like, absolutely not. And so they were like, kind of come up with names. And then someone said Mouton Noir. And I was like, Black Sheep. Okay, I like that. Like, like they said Black Sheep. And then someone said, no, Mouton Noir. And I was like, okay, right? Like, I have a French name, but I don't speak French. So, okay. And so I just kind of would laugh. And a lot of the things that came to fruition all started in the sommelier station, just us laughing and making jokes. And so I remember I created the sheep logo, and it was my screensaver, and it said Mouton Noir inside of it. And that was kind of it. And I kind of ran with it. And we would always joke. I said, yeah, I'm going to make a wine called Show Neuf. I'm going to make a wine called Pee Wee. We just always these jokes. And then when I left, I'm a firm believer in, like, putting it out in the universe and letting the universe co-conspire with you to make shit happen. Pronoia, right? And my mom used to say, you use your platform, you use different platforms, not just to talk about the things that you've done, but also to talk about the things that you want to do. Because if there's anybody listening and want to be a part of what you want to do, then, they can help you. And so I wrote an email to everybody I had met. I welcome with Thomas, just basically saying, hey, we had a really great time meeting you guys. Hopefully our paths will cross. I'm going to pursue winemaking, blah, 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 blah. And people started to write back. Today, we have these Merlot fruit that we normally sell off. We'd love to sell it to you. And I was like, I have no money. They start laughing, and they're like, pay us when you can. I'm like, really? You know what I mean? So it was just like, wherever at free terms, extended terms, no terms, that's where I went. And it's just remarkable. Like, when I don't do a lot of reflecting, right? Because I feel like I would end up on the floor in the fetal position. But, like, it was remarkable that the generosity of other people that really helped me believe that I could do this thing. And that's kind of really how it started. And like you said, because you worked at a high profile restaurant, you had all of these relationships with these people, and, they were just reciprocating some of those things, or they knew someone or something like that. And that's kind of really, I built this business off the good graces of others. Like what they say, standing on the shoulders of giants. I didn't have any money. I didn't write a business plan. I didn't raise money to pay myself X amount, which is the reason why sometimes when the money ran out, I had to go back and bartend. And so that was, that was it. So, California, I did some stuff in California, did some stuff in Lompoc, did some stuff in Napa, did some stuff in Washington State, did some stuff in Oregon. And, like, that was a space a place that spoke to me, but then also same relationships. We meet a friend of the restaurant, Mark Tarloff, who was a movie producer, started buying up some of the great vineyards in America.
Yeah, even
he
right?
polarized. Yeah, yeah. Matter of fact, he bought Kistler. Kistler had this vineyard that he bought. Why am I blanking? Occidental Vineyard. So he bought Occidental Vineyard, that famous. And then he bought a small parcel of land down in Santa Barbara called the Tempest Vineyard, which they bought that parcel of land, then they planted it. I remember going there, and it might have been Second Leaf, right at the beginning, and they were still planting. And that later became Domaine de la Côte. Right. So they renamed it. Mark got kicked out. Right. So there was a lot of stuff that was happening there.
Thank you for bringing it back to Wine Centric, as Raj was the guest on.
Yes.
Previously.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. And so, but those were my peers. Someone like Raj, it seemed at one point like everybody wanted to be a master sommelier. You wanted these initials behind your name. And a lot of people did that. But eventually I felt like the new thing was to be an entrepreneur, to do something else in wine. And you had people, you had Emmanuel Kaminji, who I met in San Antonio, and, really liked him, was awesome. And so, still, I mean, dude, I think we have some 2009 of his stuff at the restaurant. Anyways, but so it was one of those things. And so then Raj, then we're all in this thing together. And so we're all trying to figure it out and how we could make it work and how we could get off the restaurant floor and do something else,
Yeah.
And, so that was it. And so I eventually settled in Oregon. I got to Oregon through Mark Tarloff, but Seven Springs fruit was expensive. The wines were expensive. I didn't have enough. And so, I still had to pick up bartending shifts to cover my mortgage. And then I wanted to use a custom crush.
Your first vintage was with Seven Springs fruit?
Correct. 07.
But you started the winery making Merlot, right? You got some Merlot, and
that was at the beginning. Yeah, so so they both came out at the same time. Right. So that was a separate company. So I started a company called Code Noir. It was like cracking the code on value wine. And we were doing a Merlot out of Rattlesnake Hills in Washington.
We poured that when you came to BLT Prime. We poured that as our Merlot by the glass there for at least a year.
It was really through the good graces. What's his name was Fred was really good to me. That whole BLT group was good to me. But that was one of the first ones. And then we had smaller, more expensive. We had Faux Original, we had Annie Up, and so those are two different parcels from within Seven Springs. And then I realized I wanted to speak to a young.
Springs is one of the, one of the top vineyard sites for Chardonnay and Pinot Noir in the Willamette Valley
in America.
Oregon.
Yeah, well, in America too. Yeah, one of the most famous. Yeah, and
so for you to start your career with getting fruit from there, that's
Well, because somebody I had met in the restaurant who was friends of the restaurant. Matter of fact, I ran into him on 57th Street in front of Lee's art shop. And he's like, "Hey kid, what have you been up to? Last time I talked to you, you were doing this project out of Napa." I said, "Yeah, blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "Yeah, I just bought Seven Springs. You should come out, call my assistant Gretchen, and she'll get you a ticket." And so I came out. And so it's just those things where you're like, okay. And those things start to happen, stop and start. I was looking at Carlton Wine Studio, which is a custom crush. So custom crush is more of a communal space, like a co-op.
Yeah.
But it was really small, and they would max you out at 1,200 cases. And for me, I wanted to speak to a younger audience about wine, and so I didn't think that you could really do that. I know you can't do it for wines on the shelf for $75, and it's harder to do it at $35. And then I was like, I want to make wines for restaurants by the glass. And so looking for a custom crush, couldn't use there. And then I found a custom crush called Northwest. And, I've been with them for 15 years, and they really kind of helped me level the playing field, right? Where I I didn't have to have a whole I didn't have all this capital extended out because they had all the equipment. I could work inside of that. I was really close with them. And it's funny, they've grown so much. And, you can walk around and you can see, Jean-Marc Rouleau. You know what I'm saying? So many different, Larry Stone, Langlois Franco, there's tons of wine base, and it's now I've learned so much, and that's been really.
I'll also say that
it was really fun.
You were right on the cusp of that change? Like, I think wine professionals and sommeliers had already been on because when I think of Maison Noir and your wines, I think higher acid, lighter in alcohol, more like agile wine stylistically as a general rule. And that wasn't like back in the mid 2000s. We were still coming off those heavy Robert Parkerized, high alcohol, big fruit, California wines. Like stylistically, we were still there. And people in California, maybe not so much in Oregon, were still growing grapes like that. And so you also really were like right on that pendulum switching, which
No, you're
I
right.
don't know. Maybe
You're
you
right.
helped
No, it was
push the
hard.
pendulum there, or like
No, I don't think I did, but like it was hard. And I remember like just America's taste would soon change, right? Because people started drinking kombucha, sour beer, and and I was just on the spectrum just a little bit, like meaning like on that side. Like there's wines now that are way on the other side, but like there were people that were like, wow, like, and it was interesting, like, oh no, like just preaching the gospel. This is what makes it different, blah 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 blah. With food, food friendly stout wines, those kind of things. But yeah, you're right. It was I was on that spectrum where like people weren't into that yet. And I was like, oh, just wait. It eventually happened.
And I mean, talk about not having money, making wines stylistically different than what the public wants. I mean, that's a leap. Wait, was it originally distributed by T. Edward in New York? Is that who was your first distribution partner?
No. But I had talked to all of them. I had talked to Michael Skurnick, Tom from T. Edwards, and they really kind of gave me some insight on, I was like, because at the beginning you're like, I want to build a 10,000 case brand, blah blah blah, and Tom's like, well, you can build it. You don't have to leave. You can sleep in your own bed, right? Like it's like you don't have to leave. You can just build a 10,000 case brand here in New York. And that was true. I believe that of him. But also what I realized was, Mark Tarloff told me, out of everybody that we do this with, you have a real brand. And what you really need to do is get outside of New York, because in New York, everybody's special. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a dime a dozen. You're like, yeah, okay, whatever. But when you go outside of New York, your story amplifies by 1,000.
Yeah. And I remember coming down here where I live now in the Raleigh area and seeing like OPP, Pinot Noir, other people's Pinot Noir all over by the glass, and be like, oh man, good for you. Like, that's awesome.
No, and that was it. It's like just showing up and going to do the work, and then putting it on social. I think people could see it, like understand it, see the hustle, see the grind, and moving around, and like, oh yeah, like it was fun. You know what I mean? It was fun. You met a whole bunch of people, and I guess for me the biggest thing is that it was important for me to know them, less about them to know me. Right? I wanted to be able to look people in the eye and say thank you. Like you've changed me and my family's life because of the support. And as buyers,
sorry, go ahead.
As a buyer, right? As a buyer that we buy faceless brands quite a bit. Right? You know what I mean? Like Like you can't really build it without it, right? But like you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
And that was the interesting thing for me, where it was like, oh, you know me, you've been to my house for Thanksgiving, like I'm a real person, and your support means more than you know. But also, like, by you supporting me and other means that there could be more projects after me, not just for me, but for you.
Yeah.
Right. For you, the buyer, right? The more that we say, oh, that we have the power internally, as somewhat gatekeepers to put our own on, right? To make space, and I'm a pretty competitive person. And, Paul Greco said something to me one time where he's like, hey, why don't you bring the wines by? He says, we always try to support sommelier-based projects because we want to show the industry that there's life after being on the floor. And that changed everything. It changed the way that I thought about it and how I wanted to approach it. Not that anybody owed me anything. And for me, I just counted the no's. Like my things, like, I just thank you for your time. I just wanted to show up and present the wines. You know what I mean? That was it. Like present the wines, whether you bought them or not, I didn't care. I really just thought you from your time. I think eventually the numbers would work in my favor, but that was it. It's like, I want to show you the wines. I'll tell you about the wines. You can taste them. And some people, didn't like them for whatever reason, And that's none of my business, right? And then there were people that supported, and that, like I said, that was for me about traveling. And I think that kind of really set up the next part of everything, right? Like the fact that like, oh yeah, I could have built it in New York, but like I was known nationally, right? Like in that thing, like tons of people were excited, especially in places where people don't show up, right? Where people don't show up to market visits in Indiana.
Right.
I mean, I love Indiana, don't get me wrong.
But
like those are
winemakers
those
aren't
are the
getting
things.
off the plane from Paris going to Indiana for sure.
Correct. So yeah, so I think that really kind of helped all of it, man. You know, like doing the pre-show. This is like what you get out of your job. So petrified to do the pre-shift, right? You got all these people that know all this stuff that you don't know. You know, I know wine, but like you have to do it. And you know, I think right behind actually physically dying, I think public speaking is next, right? Like as far as people's fears. And I remember going to the chef saying, you know what, if I'm in this building, even on my day off or whatever, I want you to make me do the meeting. And I did the meeting every day. Right. And like, I did it every day, for years, and then, handed it off to someone else and tried to explain that to them that like, hey, this to me, it's like, this is a life skill. Right. Like, why don't I lean into a life skill? It's kind of like me and my wife talked, they're like, how come you didn't sign your kid up for soccer? I was like, well, no, we signed him up for swimming because he could not only save his life, but someone else's life. I don't know if he can save any, swimming is a life skill. Soccer is really not, right? You know what I mean? In that aspect, and nothing against soccer. It was just more one of those things. And so for me, it's like, oh no, public speaking, it's that's a job skill, life skill. And it just made it easier. Walking up to a table of strangers, right? Being able to command, getting on stage, talking to 5,000 people, talking to 10,000 people, like doing dinners, like being comfortable in front of people. That's something that I leaned into that I think that I use a lot these days. And that's what I try to explain to people. It's about what you are getting out of the job. It's not, you get paid and you get a check, but like you should be constantly figuring out what you want to get out of this job and what you can make you a better person or better at this job.
Yeah. I think the public speaking thing, I'm so thankful because for me, the public speaking just comes naturally. I like to speak in public. I always have. I was I was the star of the play in kindergarten, and it just like came easy. But yeah, for you to do that, or for people listening, but that it doesn't come naturally and it's a fear. You just gotta, I don't think there's any other answer but facing that fear straight head on, just be like, you just got to
attack
do it.
your
Like
fears.
you said, hey,
attack your fears, and everything you ever wanted is on the other side of that. I try to explain to my kids, it's like, like we're just, before I got on there, we're having breakfast, they're eating oatmeal, and they were reciting these poems that they had memorized. And, they asked number 3 to go, and he was kind of him out, and 4 just hopped on it. And I was like, see, like that, like, that's it, guys. Like, there's no need to be afraid. Like, just hop on it. The more you do it, the better you'll become at it. For those of you, we've all seen Bobby Flay, like in his first time he was on Food Network. It was a little rough. And, it is a skill that you can get better at. I'm not using him to make fun of him. I always use it as an example for myself. Right. Some people are born naturally to do it, and other people, most people, it's a skill that you can acquire and be good at.
Totally. How many cases do you make now for Maison Noir?
Let's just call it under 100,000. Let's just call it that.
Okay.
80 something, something like that, 70 something.
I mean,
if you include everything. Yeah. No,
that's unbelievable.
It's been great for me, brother.
They say
it's been great for me, and also coming from that thing where like my peers were like, "Oh man, you're making $10 Pinot Noir," and it's like, "Yeah, brother." Yeah, and so it's
damn right, I am.
Really,
it tastes good.
It's
been
a really
into
fun ride.
Noir.
Yeah, no, totally, and like meeting people where they're at. I mean, that's definitely something like, definitely something that we take on in, on the show that I have with Bon Appétit called World of Wine with Andre. It's like I'm just meeting people where they're at. Where I feel like a lot of my peers are like, he's really talking about that, like that's beneath them. It's like, well, it's not for you. It's for the people who need that information. But also, I've done your job. Yeah. It's like, hey, I've done your job at the highest level that you never did, right? For longer than you were a sommelier. So it's, it's just always just a weird thing. But like for me, it's like, meeting people where they're at. Like wine is cool. Wine is fun. It's a train where you can get on and get off. Like to enjoy wine, you don't have to be, a professor. You know what I mean? You don't have to be a professor or whiz at it. And I think if you spent any time in European culture, you understand that it's just not a meal if there's not wine. Right? I think like
Amen.
we have this romance about the French, and that we think that they all know everything about wine. And you know what I mean? And they don't. They know what they like and what they don't like, and that's it. Like, so it's been interesting to grow and to open up, and I'm really grateful to be around long enough that I can see friends and acquaintances kind of really trace their dreams or stretch the boundaries in the wine industry. It's been really, really awesome to see.
Yeah, I'll say your world of wine with Andre, I think it's synergistic with what I'm trying to do. This is maybe a little bit more long form, but like just you answer so many simple questions for people. Like, oh, what's the best way to open wine? Is it cool to how should I hold my wine glass? Like, why is there a punt on the bottle? Just like anything that people want to ask that like they're too afraid to ask a wine professional because they feel intimidated or whatever. You're already answering it for them on the show, which I think is so needed.
And even though it's been answered so many times, or that it's been tackled so many places that they could look for, I think for me, what I had to realize is that it's in the way in which it's said, right? Like, so we have all these wine books, right? We're studying for wine, we're wine professionals, but this one book explains Burgundy better than any other book. This book explains Germany better than any other book, even though they're, you know what I mean? And so I think sometimes it's like in the way in which the messages and the information is conveyed definitely makes a difference to people in the way that they can comprehend or understand it.
Yeah. Communication, man. You are an awesome communicator.
I try to be.
Before, well done. Before we get out of here, how did the Bon Appétit come about?
Yeah, no, they just reached out. I think for a lot of people, just from stuff. So I have 2 shows with Bon Appétit. So the World of Wine with Andre Mack is just me, talking head. Is just me kind of talking about wines, tasting wine, answering questions, doing demonstrations. And then they came up with this show called Through the Grapevine. And it's where I interview celebrities. We do 5 rounds. We do 5 different wines at different price points. I ask interview questions, and then the celebrity tells me how much they would pay for it or how much they think the wine costs. And so that was really fun and interesting because it just wasn't just me talking to the camera. It was a way for me to have some type of banter with another guest, and that was always really fun. So we had those 2 shows, and then, but before all of that is like, when people say, there's no such thing as an overnight success, like, so wine on television never really worked. That, a lot of people said it never worked. It wasn't until the movie Somm, the documentary Somm, came out that they saw some level of success with it. And then that's when things started to change. But before that, I had, producers, presidents of producing companies come to me, and we shot a whole bunch of sizzle reel. Like, they were into wine, but they weren't real sure how it would convey on television. So we done all that. But, before that, I had a Microsoft commercial, 16. I had a Cadillac commercial. So these were just people who just reached out and like kind of dug what I did, So, I'm on Twitter, back when it was called Twitter, Microsoft, I get like this message from Microsoft. They're like, we really dig your work. We should work together. And I'm like, is this spam? Like, who is this? Like,
Yeah.
And I reached back out, and it was for real. And so they came out to the winery. We shot a whole bunch of stuff, and it was like really fun. I did Cadillac. I mean, I have a Johnny Walker commercial, bro. You know what I mean? They flew me to Edinburgh, Scotland. You know what I mean? So like, so I had done just throughout, like, people had approached through social, just, just saying, hey, we like your style and what you've been up to and what you're doing. Like, we would love to like work with you. And so those things all came before something like Bon Appétit. And, and so when Bon Appétit came, I was like, oh, well, maybe, like, let's see. We talked, they signed me to a 2 pilot deal. We shot 2 videos, the first video released. And then after that, once we released the first video, they signed me to like a 12 episode thing. And so I've been rocking with them for like maybe 3 or 4 years now. And that that's been interesting. Like, just in the sense of like, I don't really watch the videos. And I have to say that like at the beginning, I didn't really have fun shooting them, right? Because like you're in a dark room, right? There's got to be a level of trust. You're in the dark room. Nobody laughs at my jokes. There's 3 people on the other side of, the camera. And then it's like, yeah, I never reviewed them. People on my team would review them to see if I blacked out and said some crazy shit. And then they would come out and I would never really look at them. They would send me a social cut to post. Okay, done. And so that was it. And then, then my kid would be like, this video got 1 million views. And I was like, what? I was like, and I'm like, who the hell is watching these videos? Like, it was just like, I just couldn't fathom that part of it. And then it was maybe like 8 months later that, people started to be like, hey, aren't you this guy? Like, I know you from somewhere. And what was interesting was, there were like just people who were into wine, but there was a lot of restaurant employees. I was at a bar, and they make, I was at a bar at a pizza place in Brooklyn, and it was this guy walked out with some pizza, and then he came back in with the pizza, and he's like, hey, I know you. He goes, I work, he worked at a restaurant that had a Michelin star, and was like, hey, I know you. We watch you all the time to learn about wine. You taught me so much about wine. And that caught me off guard. And I was like, oh, wow, people in the restaurant are like looking at it. He went back outside, got his girlfriend, came back in, wanted to take photos. You know what I mean? So it was like, that part was interesting to me. I was in Chicago and like 13 members of the staff lined up. I mean, I stayed late, but they all lined up at the end because they take photos and say thank you, because 2 weeks ago they were cramming for the wine test and they said they were watching my videos. And like, I think that's when it like changed for me, where it was like, wow, like I am making, like that whole thing about having an impact on this industry that I felt that I'm very grateful to be a part of, and to be able to give back and to have an impact in that. This has been pretty remarkable in that way.
Yeah,
and so, over the years it's grown, it's grown, I mean, I'm in Austria. There's a table of 12 Germans that just start freaking out. And I'm with a couple of friends. They're like one guy had a friend, and then he was with his friend, and he and that guy was like, who the fuck are you? It's like, I'm just some guy. And so, the table of 12 people, they were sitting right next to us. They came over. I went and took photos with them. They wanted me to choose their next bottle of wine for the table. Then some people, because we were sitting outside, and some people from inside recognized me. They came out, so it's just been an interesting thing.
Did you choose the wine?
I take
none
of it for granted. Oh yeah, I chose. I think it was a Magnum of Côte Rôtie, Bernard Lafay, something like that. Actually,
Nice.
And then I bought it for them.
Oh man, even cooler.
They wanted me to select it, and they were going to pay for it, and I was like, no, no, I'm going to buy it from. This is pretty. You know what I mean? It's just pretty cool. It's just something that I'll never get used to. But when I started to realize that the impact that people were watching, and not just it was industry people. There's novice. I was in the airport. And I thought they were talking to my manager, and I was like, oh, these guys there were some frat boys sitting behind us. I thought they were talking to my manager, and she's like, no, they're talking to you. They're talking about you. And, so it's interesting, like, in the way to be able to touch people and to impact people. And,
what the fuck is going on, man?
It's been fun.
Hey, one last question before I let you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm always curious. What do you pair with soup? What wine?
I'm a champagne, rosé champagne.
Rosé champagne. All good.
Yeah. That's we used to. I forgot what the soup it was, but I like champagne with soup. I don't know. It's just tactile. And generally, this is kind of when we first started. This is when we started to decant champagne, right? Which wasn't a thing. And now there's lots of the producers now who bottle at lower atmospheres for pressure.
That makes sense.
That wasn't a thing back in 2004. So we would decant champagne and serve it with a soup course. And I remember Eric Asimov came in, and I think that was one of his most memorable experiences from 2000 for 10 years, right? From 2004 to 2014.
That's cool. I never remember. Yeah. That's always been one of those things, like, talk about your weaknesses. What do I pair with soup? Because texturally, it's just weird. Going liquid with liquid, but yeah.
Totally. Yeah, we used to do some sherry. We kind of played around with it a lot, but I really like champagne, that kind of because it's like meeting texture with texture.
Yeah.
Even though they're both liquids. Yeah.
Well, Andre, thank you so much for being here, man, and sharing your story. There are so many golden nuggets in this episode that I hope people take in and enjoy and can use in their own lives. So thank you for being here. And I'll say for all of you out there, go get yourselves some Maison Noir wines and you will drink deliciously.
Thank you for watching and/or listening. Please like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Also review. 5 stars are preferred. Drink deliciously.